Hey, what's up everyone? Long time no talk. Figured I'd come out here and try and record another video for the Lessons Learned series. Maybe even make another sub-series. It's been quite a while. The sub-series I'm kind of thinking about is about disclosure. It comes up in Struggle Well and many other books, of course, but I talk a lot about unloading your rucksack and how everything that happens to you over your life, especially difficult or traumatic experiences, get loaded into your rucksack, and sometimes that rucksack will get really heavy and it gets really hard to carry by yourself. So that's kind of the idea behind this little sub-series, if you will, is I'm going to try to unload some of my rucksack because it makes it a little bit easier to carry, and if we all share the load, everybody can go further faster. It's kind of the idea. Another one I'll wrap it up with probably at the end is another idea called Scars from Kyle Carpenter's book, You Are Worth It. I'll come back to that at the end. So the experience I'm going to talk through today is one of the hardest parts of my entire life, and it was losing Tim, Dan, and Liz in Baghdad in 2007. Also known as EOD Team Lima. I'm going to try to stay on track and not get too distracted by shiny things and squirrels. I am out in a public place, so you see me looking around. If you can even see my eyes on this old Hero 3 Plus from that far away, that's why. But anyway, to get to the story. So we were all stationed at Hill Air Force Base together for a couple of years before that deployment to Baghdad, and spent a lot of time with Dan. I actually met him the first day I got back from my previous Iraq deployment to Balad. That very first day, hadn't had a drop of alcohol in 7 months, and we went out and got quite a few Guinnesses at the NCO club on base, and suffice to say, first time meeting Dan, I knew he was a solid dude, and we were going to have a lot of fun together, and we sure did. Tim came in from USAFE, one of the European bases, as a tech sergeant, and he had a love of sports cars and things that were fast, which he had a Audi TT, which was pretty hilarious because he was a really big guy, and he barely fit in that thing, and I remember going on rides in it, and I don't know how somebody so tall fit in such a car so small. And one time I tried to sit in the pathetic excuse for a back seat as we ripped around some canyon roads, which was hilariousness at its best. Liz, she came in while I was deployed, I think to Balad, if I remember correctly, but I could be mistaken. You know, real pretty girl, but not one to want to be treated that way, and she definitely held her own, and she was tough as hell, no doubt about that. She came from the same region of the country I do, over towards Philadelphia, so we had that in common, and always joked about the Eagles and how bad they were, or when they went to the Super Bowl, that was finally our year, and all that good stuff. But so I'll skip ahead to Baghdad from here. So we all got deployed to Baghdad in 2006. Some of us were on a different set of orders that meant a bunch of us showed up a little earlier and stayed a little longer. I was on the shorter set. I wound up being there about 5-ish months, and the people on the other set were there about 6-7 months. But Tim, Dan, and Liz got into country before we did. And you know, we got there to the Baghdad International Airport, and we were running EOD operations supporting the Army in the vicinity of the city, and then 2 forward operating bases, refer to them as FOBs from here on out, south of the city. So the tour was pretty crazy. It was definitely a lot of action on a regular basis. Lots of IEDs, lots of UXOs, lots of rocket attacks on the base, those kinds of things. And it was towards the end of our tour In early January of 2007, when we were all sitting in the operations tent, and a phone call came in and asked for our commander, our flight commander. And when he got on the phone, he immediately told all of us to get the F out of the tent because we didn't need to be in there, of course, while he was receiving the information, which we automatically knew as soon as he said that. That's not the way he was on a normal basis, that something was wrong, and something was pretty seriously wrong. We were all standing outside the operations tent and thinking about, what team was out, because we always kept track, and none of our teams from the main base there had been out. The team from Falke, none of them were out, because every time we would go out on a call, we'd call back to the main base and let them know, and then we would track that so we knew who was out running operations when. So we knew that the team at Mahmudiya was out, and that was Team Lima. So we knew something serious had happened to them. A little while later, some of these details are a little fuzzy. There's two specific moments that were very not fuzzy, but some of them, there's portions that I completely have no memory of whatsoever, and others that I have very distinct memory, and then others I have some fuzzy memory. But at some point later, our flight commander and our flight chief called the team leaders back into the tent and told us that Team Lima was out. They got hit. There were at least 2 fatalities and two members wounded, if I remember correctly. And that was all the information they had at the moment. So they told us we could tell people if we wanted to. That was all the information they had, and they would tell us more when they got it. So we went outside and told everybody everything that we knew. There's no sense in hiding that. And waited for more information to come. And at some point later, we found out that Tim and Dan had been killed instantly, and Liz and I believe one of the security soldiers were wounded pretty bad. I'm not sure exactly when the soldier passed, but he unfortunately eventually passed away, if not right away. I can't quite recall that detail exactly. But Liz was medevaced out and on her way to the green zone, to trauma center. So they put her on a medevac and flew her to the green zone. And of course, knowing Liz as tough and stubborn as she was, we knew she was going to make it. We all gathered up in our movie tent, and we were just kind of all sitting there staring at the floor together in silence because what was there to say, I guess. And the Air Force was trying to do what they could, but they're not really equipped to handle these kinds of things on a regular basis, thankfully. And they tried to help, and they sent over some people from mental health, like a psychologist or something of that sort. And you could definitely tell she was out of her element. She was reading off some checklist with her eyes looking down the whole time, because it was obviously pretty heavy. It was at that point when our flight chief came in. He opened the door, and it's pretty dark in that tent, and he opened the door and still had his sunglasses on, and stepped in, and we could see his face was pretty wet from some tears. And that's when he told us with a understandably broken voice that Liz didn't make it. So of course that really hammered things hard right there. Somewhere in between here, maybe before, maybe after, I don't remember, we had to go out and do what we call a post-blast analysis. That's where we go out and try to do like combat crime scene investigation, CSI, right? So we try to figure out what happened so we can hopefully catch the bad guys and keep it from happening again. And I distinctly remember the team that was on primary standby was 2 guys who were also from Hill, and I'll never forget seeing that team leader very loudly crying, grabbing his body armor and his rifle, and moving pretty quickly towards the truck anyway, because it had to be done. And that was when our flight chief came out and grabbed him and said, we're going to send another team out there on this because this is a little too close to home for you. I mean, we all knew each other, we all loved each other, but I think that was a pretty good call to send a team that maybe didn't know Tim, Dan, and Liz for a couple of years and instead only a couple of months, even if that's a minor difference. So they swapped out to another team. That team went out there and performed the post-blast. At some point they got back and they told us about you know, what the scene had looked like, and you know, they told us that Dan was obviously closest. He basically protected everybody the best he could when it went off. And it, in case I didn't mention it, was a vehicle-borne IED, a car bomb. Tim was a few feet away, and it looked like he just kind of laid down and took a nap with a bit of a bloody nose and some other obvious wounds to some extremities. But you know, the blast overpressures can kill you without, you know, taking amputations and such. And they also found at the back of their truck this little doll that Liz had. She would wear it tied around with some 550 cord to her body armor, this little tiny bear named Tallulah. And that got separated from her vest when she got hit back at the truck. And so when these things happen, one of the first things that you have to do is inventory all the personal effects and have them shipped back to the next of kin. But I happened to come across Tallulah after all that stuff had already been done, so I made sure to bring it back and deliver it. But I don't want to jump ahead too far here. So we started inventorying everything. We went into their tents and went through all their belongings and took notes on everything. We found a half-empty bottle, no, it was a completely empty bottle of tequila in somebody's stuff. I don't remember whose. Of course, you're not allowed to have alcohol during combat deployments. But it was already empty, and we were a little laughing about it. Like, what the hell, guys? You couldn't leave us a shot to be able to do this, because we sure as hell could use it right now. But after you inventory all the personal effects, then you take them over to the mortuary affairs team, and they pack them up in these big giant boxes. And it's quite a surreal experience to see a whole bunch of those big giant heavy-duty cardboard boxes with labels on them that you know that's all service members who've been killed. Speaking of next of kin too, so what happens when somebody gets hurt or injured, they do this thing called a communications blackout. You're not allowed to email home, write home, call, whatever, until all the next of kin have been notified. And that took 3 days for all three of their families to be notified. So the news was reporting that 3 airmen from Hill had been killed in combat operations, and nobody back home knew who it was. And I mean, how do you approach that, right? Like, you don't want it to be anybody, but it is somebody. And I don't know, it's just one of those things, like, thinking about it, like, you feel guilty for feeling relieved when you hear somebody got hit, that it's not one person, but then at the same time it is somebody else. That kind of plays, I guess, into some survivor's guilt later on, but not to get off track. So we went and did our ceremony, or the ramp ceremony, where their remains were placed in the heavy metal caskets with American flag over them, and we carried them onto the plane, onto the C-130, to be flown back to Dover, and then returned to the cemeteries where they'd be buried or cremated or what have you. And this was one of the times I could definitely distinctly remember very specifically. We had a bunch of our replacements had started to show up, because this was towards the end of our tour. We were about ready to go home in about 2 weeks. Week or two, maybe, I don't remember. And so they were all there too, which was comforting for sure. But I say that because I remember standing out there on the ramp, and the chaplain was standing on the back of the plane after we had carried them all on there. And he said, "Let their names be heard one final time," and then he said all of their names. And I just remember completely losing control and almost collapsing on the spot in tears. And I have no idea who it was, but there was another EOD guy standing next to me, one of our replacements, who caught me and picked me up and hugged the crap out of me until I was able to regain my composure. So I always wonder who that was, because I wish I could thank him. But that also made it so, I've been making it a point in my life to prove that chaplain wrong. That chaplain was awesome, right? I don't want to talk bad about him at all, because he did some stuff for us later that was incredible. And that's probably just kind of a thing that is part of the procedure or protocol or something. But yeah, I've made it a point in my life to make sure that was not the last time their names have been said, and I will continue to do so until I'm no longer above ground. This is where it starts to get kind of fuzzy. I believe it was about 3 days later when all the next of kin had been notified, and finally got to call home, and that was a really rough phone call back to Mom, but lots and lots of tears. At least I was alive, I guess. But then that same day, towards the evening, we had our official memorial ceremony there at Baghdad on the tarmac. And some things went down there that I'm not going to go into detail on, because that's not the point of this. I'll just say that there were some prime examples of extremely poor leadership, and also some prime examples of unbelievably awesome leadership regarding that memorial ceremony. Maybe I'll do another one of these and talk about that specifically, but towards the end of the ceremony, what happens is you have what they call a soldier's cross, where they'll take the M4 and a bayonet and stick it into some boots and have it standing up with the helmet and dog tags hanging off the pistol grip. And then a picture of the individual. So we had, of course, 3 of those set out for Tim, Dan, and Liz. And everybody walks by, and he can leave like a coin or a memento or something, and slowly salutes each one as you move along. And I remember being okay with Tim, being okay with Dan, and I don't know if it was because Liz was the last one, or if because I knew one of my best buds was going to ask her to get married, another EOD guy there too, when we got back. But as soon as I put my hand on the helmet that was on Liz's cross, that was another moment that I thankfully didn't collapse, but I could not control the tears for sure. But of course, this isn't a thing people rush, so you take as much time as you need. Everybody completely understands that. So eventually move along from there. And I remember all of us there at the flight, all the people who had come in as replacements, we all just kind of sat there with all those pictures for hours after everybody else was gone in the dark. It felt like hours. I don't know. We were there a real long time before we finally left, because it was kind of like that last goodbye you didn't want to say, but you didn't really have a choice. You have to leave at some point. So yeah, that's probably one of the hardest experiences of my entire life. Not probably, it is. And you know, like I talked about earlier, part of this whole disclosure thing is taking some stuff out of your rucksack and seeing what you want to put back in, what you don't, or maybe somebody else can help you carry a little bit. So that's kind of the hope with this, is to encourage other people to do the same. I'll continue to add a couple more videos to this series. You know, this idea also, like I mentioned previously in the beginning, comes up in Kyle Carpenter's book, You Are Worth It, talking about scars, and how, you know, sharing your scars with people. Sometimes you can see scars and sometimes you can't. Like, nobody can really see this scar. Like, the only way you know about it is if I tell you about it. And telling people about it is really, really hard. I don't really talk about this, especially even in that much detail, very often, if ever. Like, I think I can count on my hand how many times I've done it since, and that was 15 years ago. But when it comes to scars, Kyle Carpenter, he jumped on a grenade and should have died, but didn't. Saved one of his best friend's lives. And his scars are all very, very visible, right? And what he's talking about with those scars, whether visible or not, is scars are proof that something happened to you. The body fought through it and tried to heal it, and you're still here. So, kind of like along similar lines of unloading that ruck and spreading that weight around, sharing out the load with more people to make it so that everybody can carry it and move further faster. The same thing, right? So hopefully this will serve as an inspiration for other people to share their scars. See my scars, maybe share yours, and start on a path to living a better life, not in spite of, but because of the things you've been through. So if you made it all this way, thanks, and see you on the next one.